Hello and welcome to the Fintech Finance Virtual Arena. Today we're discussing SMEs and their need for not just open banking, but open finance in order to survive. So joining me today is Peter Lord from Codat and David McHenry from Silicon Valley Bank. Peter, first up, could I get you to introduce yourself and Codat, please?
Thanks, Doug. Hi, I'm Pete. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Codat. We help our clients connect to their small business customers' financial software. So accounting, banking, e-commerce, and point of sale.
Brilliant. And David, you've been kind of a semi-regular now on the Fintech Finance Virtual Arena. How are you doing? And could you give us, our viewers who might not be aware, a bit of background to your role and also Silicon Valley Bank?
Yeah, definitely. No, and it's great to be back on another one of these. And so, by way of background, David McHenry, I head up Global Treasury and Payments Advisory for Silicon Valley Bank for the EMEA region. So my focus is on our transaction banking and cards and payments business and working with all of our clients across the region. And Silicon Valley Bank, we get the chance to and are really fortunate to work with the most amazing set of clients, I think, in the entire world. So we're focused on the innovation economy with a presence in the US, our branch in the UK, we're in Germany, Denmark, Ireland, China, all across the world, Canada at this point. And we support the investors in the innovation economy with the VCs and the private equity, as well as tech companies all the way from early stage to public tech companies, and really helping enable them, change the world and do what's next.
That's absolutely brilliant. Well, Pete, could I come to you first? We've kind of got to talk about the elephant in the room, because I think this is the catalyst for a lot of these issues, and that is the pandemic. How would you say that the pandemic has impacted attitudes, at least when it comes to open finance?
Yeah, sure. And I suppose, it's probably more than just attitudes. So it definitely changed the needs for something like open finance. So, firstly, we deal with SMEs, and in very short number of months, many SMEs will have changed. Some will have grown, others unfortunately probably will have struggled. And so the need, therefore, is to have real-time data and a real-time understanding of those businesses, and that's a need felt by banks and lenders in particular. So the other kind of big trend is the shift in those businesses from operating in kind of offline to online. And what that means is that there is now a vast amount of data that those SMEs can utilize, and that the banks and lenders can utilize, that's generated through small businesses' use of things like online sales and e-commerce software. So that's I suppose the silver lining, is that we need this real-time understanding, but thankfully we're having more and more data that can enable that.
Yeah, I can completely imagine. And David, how have you seen from the kind of the bank's perspective, how have you seen SMEs deal with, their attitudes towards open finance? Are you now seeing a bigger demand for it?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at what COVID being this inflection point, and it's driven innovation in so many areas ahead 1, 2, 3 years in terms of, I think, clients' expectations, even how we're operating for certain things. Exactly what Peter said. Real-time information, management information is absolutely critical. That was driven by the rapidly changing conditions, the fact that teams are distributed, they're trying to share information, they need single sources of truth, and all of that integrated, and then you had these rapidly changing needs around relationships, whether it was with financial institutions or government schemes and grant schemes and these new lending schemes that were coming up, on top of things that were already happening in the digital tax arena. That was really just the start of this. So you've just seen this kind of inflection point where teams want this actual contextualized information. Open banking was already starting to crack that open, where banks were freeing up that information so it could integrate banking and payment details in accounting systems and things like that, which is really baseline information. The idea that you need contextualized value-added data that comes out of accounting systems that then can integrate further afield, which has much more tied on information than just baseline payments going in and out of an account. That's much more meaningful, and with the fact that these teams and these companies and these SMEs need to make decisions quicker, take advantage of lending, take advantage of working capital, and all this in rapidly changing conditions. Open finance I think has been driven to the front even more than what the idea of open banking was.
Interesting. Now, as of filming, it's very topical at the moment. Obviously, we've just having the United States election going on. With that dramatic change, what are we going to see when it comes to open finance? What's it going to do for small businesses in the States, especially compared to Europe?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it is how you're going to see it evolve. Because you started the idea of what is open. It starts with the baseline idea of what is open banking. Very much mandated and regulated and pushed to actually be happening here in the UK and in greater Europe. Whereas the US, the idea of open banking has really evolved over the number of years as what banks do want to take part in that. You do have players like Plaid and other ones, and Yodlee, that were already there aggregating account data and opening that up, and it was already being pulled into lots of different accounting systems, and there weren't some of the blocks like we had pre-PSD2 that banks weren't allowing that information to flow into that. So you've seen that type of open aggregated information already happening in the US, but it's not mandated, it's not so much regulated. So it's the players who want to be involved, who are being client-centric, who want this integrated information. Then the next step of open finance, because you already have maybe a bedrock of that information, I think you probably have that next step of financial institutions and other platforms being on the front foot to actually go that next step for open finance. Whereas here in the UK and Europe, we're still dealing with the idea of being minimally viably compliant with the PSD2 regulation, which is open banking, and just starting to think about what's the value added of PSD2 and open banking and the real value added going to open finance.
Interesting. And Peter, do you have anything to add on that in terms of what you can actually see open finance being able to provide small businesses in the States? I mean, as David said, because the organizations aren't hamstrung by just trying to be compliant, do you think there could be some value added services on open finance for small businesses in America?
Yes, definitely. I think what's really interesting, especially in the US, is that small businesses are demanding that the connectivity happens, and I think that is probably kind of one of the kind of bigger influences to make things happen in a shorter period of time than the kind of mandated connectivity, as David described, which is the way it has happened and it's happening with open finance in the UK. In terms of further products and services, we're seeing a shift in terms of expectations. I think we in our consumer lives now expect that our systems and services work together seamlessly. We expect to have nice dashboards that show our personal financial positions, and we're now seeing exactly the same expectations from SMEs, and many of our clients and some of the banks we work with are now looking to create those user experiences for businesses in terms of business insights and cash flow forecasting, all as kind of value added products and services on top of a kind of a core banking stack.
Interesting. And so, David, would you agree with Pete there in that one of the biggest things that open finance can do for small businesses in the States is have that cash flow management? Is that going to be critical going forward for SMEs post-pandemic? I say post, but we can do the best we can.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, as I mentioned too, like the inflection point and the stress point that COVID has put on businesses of all sizes, that working capital has been really stretched. Cash flows have been really stretched. So that idea of being able to manage your inflows, manage your outflows, know all of that information, but then at the same time, bridge that gap, that working capital gap, as efficiently as possible, and have that contextualized information that open finance can be used to leverage better opportunities with lenders or liquidity partners, and the management of that, both not just being able to get access to new funds to be able to bridge that gap during the pandemic right now, but also on the flip side of that, for organizations, lenders, banks, and other financial institutions to be able to get that insight and use that to make those decisions, and importantly monitor the health of their clients, is super important. So again, COVID has definitely, and the pandemic has put that into much more focus of why open finance is really important for that.
Interesting. And Pete, if I could ask, why have we gotten to this point where it has been the pandemic, it has been open finance, which is, I think, in the world of finance, quite a new movement. Why has it taken this long for cash flow for SMEs to really be tackled in finance?
Yeah, so I think it's been a trend that's been evolving for some time, and there's always been a kind of a focus on cash flow and understanding that cash flow is so important for businesses. I think the open banking has obviously set a precedent, and one of the precedents that it's set is for businesses to be able to consent and authorize a third party to have access to their data for, as David said, not necessarily just a single point in time, but on an ongoing basis. And that's the foundation for building something like a cash flow forecasting tool, and makes it possible that could be powered by accounting software among other data sources.
Interesting. And so, we've spent a bit of time covering how open finance is going to help the small, medium enterprises in the States. But David, I'd really like to get your perspective on this. How can open finance actually benefit the large institutions and banks around the world?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it benefits us a ton if you think about banks, and one of the things that for a really long period of time that we've done, we could have done a much better job with the information that we have, the repository of information that we have, the comings and goings of funds, and being able to give insights to our clients, help make decisions on our side about clients across a number of different products, whether it's lending or deposits or other financial offers that we can make. We generally haven't done the greatest job on that. We've done things in a very manual way. We continue to ask questions that we could probably derive some of those insights from some of our data. But also, again, it gets into that idea of baseline financial data where we have transactional data, and then that greater contextualized data that you're going to get with open finance. So the ability to not just augment the data and the information that we have from our clients, but to augment that with additional contextualized data from other sources that aren't just what's within our bank or transacted through our clients' accounts, but contextualized from their financial reporting system, contextualized from other sources of information or other partners they might be using, for us to be able to give them more insight, gather more details, be able to put together more specifically designed solutions for them is something that, again, open finance and putting together some solutions like this takes us to really another level of that use of data.
Interesting. Now, you were saying that the banks maybe could have done better, and before we take that kind of negative view, Peter, do you think we've got to that point where the banks could have done better? Is that actually been quite a steep, almost exponential change? Has it been a long time coming? Would you say it's been complacency, or is it actually just the fact that suddenly now we have the ability to look at all this data, and actually open finance has just come about at the right time? Do you think it's fair to categorize the banks as being complacent?
I don't particularly think that's fair. No, I think that banks are innovative. It just takes them a little bit longer, perhaps, to get off the to get moving. We work with lots of banks, and we're a young and growing technology company. So I think it's very forward thinking of the banks that do work with us to do so, and they see results. One of our tier one banks in the UK, as an example, has seen the time to cash for a particular product cut by 90%, and that's through working with Codat and the data and the connectivity that we enable them to have as a technology provider.
Interesting. And going forward, open finance to me is really a good example of what fintech is all about. It's this kind of opening up of new services to particularly underserved businesses. So, I mean, David, do you think that going forward, banks are going to always have this invested interest in and almost social responsibility in providing these new services to businesses that have been previously underserved?
Well, I think first and foremost, we have the responsibility to our clients to be able to serve and work with them the way they want to have a partner. So being integrated, being more real-time, having better information, being able to be there when they need us at the moments that matter, is absolutely our responsibility to be a safe and secure and trusted partner. And ultimately, I think the success of our organization is built on that. So I think any financial institution, including ourselves, who wants to be successful has to serve a client in that way. So, and going forward, this is obviously what is going to be not just the way our clients want to gain insights, be able to get offers, be able to sign up for things, instead of delivering things manually, everything from manual signatures, but actually submitting financial statements, things like that. It's just a baseline expectation. They need to be more efficient. We have to be more efficient with gathering that data for them, and then making decisions as quick as possible to ensure that their financial health and their success can be, whether it's in a challenging time like this, or even going forward. That's just something that is our responsibility to act as quickly as possible on their behalf.
Interesting. And Pete, do you think making advancements on these technologies and following up with open finance continually, having that social responsibility, do you think that the banks are going to be able to continue to do that? And with the ever-changing changes in technology and regulations, it seems to be almost monthly we see massive changes to payment technology. Do you think that innovation is going to be continually to be matched going on in the future? And is that going to cause open finance to potentially burn out?
Yeah, no, there's a lot of innovation, as you rightly say. I don't think that open finance is about to burn out at any time. No, I think that what we're seeing is kind of this open movement gather steam. We had open banking, talking about open finance. I think it's all part of a much larger kind of open data kind of shift. And I think we've got a long way to go before it becomes the complete norm.
Yeah. And David, do you think payment innovation is the main driver behind the work in open finance, or do you think it is a cultural, almost customer demand shift?
I think it's a cultural and customer demand shift, because if you look at all the various platforms, whether it's online systems, financial systems, point of sale systems, anything that you are putting together to build and operate a business from a technical standpoint, those are all integrated. And more, it's not one single monolithic system. There are multiple systems that are up in the cloud that are integrating through API technology, or through partnerships where there are critical linkages between the two. So I think it's that idea of how you build an infrastructure for a company and for a business that has already changed. And this is just pulling in that next layer of integration with the financial system. And it will go beyond, just as Peter said, it's open data. This will tie into utilities and suppliers and so many other aspects and for small businesses and for large enterprises. So it is that idea of layering upon all these solutions and services in a much different way than supply chains and information chains used to be 5, 10, 20, 30 years ago.
Brilliant. And David, just before I move on, can I ask you, obviously your role being really, you always seem to be at the forefront of innovation with your role. Whenever I've spoken to you in previous interviews, you seem very much interested in that payment innovation. So what's it been like working at a bank like Silicon Valley Bank with this advent of open finance and open banking? What have you seen at Silicon Valley Bank that you can say we've managed to do this for our customers?
Yeah, I look at some of the stuff that we've done for a number of years. So we, starting in the US, that idea of open banking, we have had a long-term integration through the OFX standard in the US to actually have our accounts embedded into financial platforms, whether it's things like QuickBooks or Xero, and actually being kind of an ongoing member and board seat in the OFX consortium. And now you're starting to see an evolution to newer standards in the US that we're trying to take a similar route in. So the idea of, we've never kind of been scared of opening up our banking data because our clients were always asking for better integrated information. We weren't scared about having that go out of our walled garden, that all of our clients needed to be in our open bank or in our online banking and downloading reports and doing that. No, we wanted to be embedded in their financial system. So the idea that we have that as a core part of our DNA of wanting to be there in the middle of it, but not scared about integrating, the fact that we can then leverage that with the idea of PSD2 and taking that a step further, doing things around open finance coming in the future and making that not just be pushing out our information, but actually pulling in information and doing things. I think I'm really excited that we can kind of continue to do that.
That's absolutely brilliant to hear a financial institution like yourselves, as you said, having that kind of DNA of being open, having that innovation at your core. It's really exciting to hear that, and I'm always quite envious of your role to kind of be at the forefront of that. Also on the same kind of line, Pete, you've kind of alluded to it, but before with some of your previous answers. But in more simpler terms, how can Codat help other institutions, specifically ones in, for instance, North America, and SMEs, develop a deeper understanding of their finances and provide that clearer data that I think underpins open finance? Yeah,
of course. So I think, as David mentioned, there's we're not talking, small businesses don't use one monolithic system. They use lots of different products and services, and they want those services to be connected seamlessly. And in order to have the understanding of their financials, they need kind of a central place where all that data can exist and be connected, rather than being in separate silos. And what Codat does, and how we help and we enable, is we're the technology layer that makes that possible. And that means that banks and enterprises don't have to reinvent the wheel building out and maintaining that connectivity. They can use the Codat platform to create real value add for small businesses and bring that to market very quickly, and it'd be a very robust and scalable product.
Excellent. It's brilliant to hear that kind of just ability to kickstart some institutions, because some institutions, unlike SVB, it's just completely legacy based, not innovative at the core. So that must be such a massive boon for them. And I've got to ask then, if I'll probably ask both of you this, but to start with David, if we were to categorize open finance then as its key main pillars, would you describe it as lending, payments, and effectively just customer experience? Would you consider those three to be the most important pillars of open finance?
I think so. I think because they're all tied into it. You look at it. There's probably aspects of onboarding that you're bringing in of initial things, but those are tied to whether it's account opening or very important in terms of lending, both onboarding and then monitoring of lending. I think Open Finance very much kind of enables all of that. And then I think there is the idea, the aspect of the idea of moments that matter. So the more, if clients through Open Finance are open to giving that type of information to a financial institution and a partner, the idea that they can then be gaining not just insight off of that, but also what are solutions that are very pointed at certain points of time, whether it is liquidity, whether it is deposit options, things like that are going on, that I think is also a big aspect that Open Finance can enable, besides that onboarding and the lending and the payments aspect of it.
Interesting. And Pete, can I also have your insight? What would you categorize as the most important aspects of Open Finance?
Yeah, I think one of the most important aspects is it's not too prescriptive. So if you look at open banking, there's a requirement to make certain types of data available in particular formats, but it's not prescriptive as to how that can be used by third parties. And so I think the important thing is for it to be structured in a way that enables that innovation. And we don't know what the next generations of products and services that are going to be built on open banking and open finance platforms is, and that's the really exciting thing.
Yeah, that flexibility sounds so exciting. It's almost waiting for that email element to drop after the internet came out, and then suddenly everyone realizes what the internet is all about. And I can certainly see that coming in the next couple of years. Now, I don't want to throw open banking under the bus here, but I mean, I've got to ask, do you, David, just to kick off, do you think open finance is going to be adopted more readily than open banking was as an industry?
No, I don't, because I think, initially, especially when we're talking from the Eurocentric sphere, is open banking was so regulatory driven. So all financial institutions had to have some aspect of that open banking. I think the financial institutions that want to be successful in the future will adopt open finance, just like they'll go above and beyond open banking to open up other bits and pieces of open banking like information and enhanced APIs. But then that just leads towards that open finance, which is much more of a not just pushing out information, but also being able to take in information for that open finance and being integrated with that. So I think because it's not regulatory driven, it will be customer centric and driven by client demand and prospect demand and market demand. So the financial institutions and enterprises that want to be successful will have to embrace it. So it'll be a different uptick.
Interesting. And Pete, can I also have your insight, please?
Yes, I definitely agree that it will be customer driven. I think we're I run Codat, and the financial products and services that we choose as a business, it's a necessity that they integrate and they connect to the other software that we use, and so I think there'll be kind of a voting with the feet when it comes to connectivity, and that will obviously have an impact in terms of the financial institutions and their prioritization, and to what extent they want to adopt more open standards. The open banking precedent to connect accounts we've talked about, I think will obviously help in terms of open finance adoption. I think there's another factor to consider though, which is the differences in terms of the data and the data models when it comes to open finance compared to open banking. So Codat, we specialize in providing a standard data model, and from systems that are reported to be the same in terms of their function, for example, accounting software, but actually very different under the hood when it comes to how that data is represented and how it's returned from API. So I think the technological kind of barrier to open finance is probably a lot larger than open banking, where the data complexity is less.
Definitely. And to wrap up then, the frame of the discussion really is the need for open finance. And so Pete, can I ask, do you think that for specifically SMEs in the States, the ones that don't move with their feet, the ones that don't actually start to embrace open finance, with the pandemic, with everything moving very digital, very mobile, do you think those small businesses will just be left behind and eventually wither and go bankrupt almost?
Yeah, I think probably not quite as bleak as that.
It's withering.
There'll be, I don't think we're going to see an overnight kind of a shift away from finance institutions who will serve businesses that aren't as digitally native. But I think there is, an accelerated shift when it comes to COVID, and we kind of what was an inevitability before is now kind of happening much faster. That businesses in 10 years' time are, they're not going to be visiting branches; they're going to be doing everything online. And what's really interesting is that with COVID, we're seeing lots of businesses, unfortunately, cease trading, but we're also seeing a huge increase in the number of small businesses that are being created. And if you're a business that is starting in 2020, then you're going to be using cloud software, and you're going to be connecting those systems to the bank, and you're going to be using financial products that are accessible from anywhere online.
That's really exciting, having that kind of survival of the fittest through open finance and being that cloud native. So David as well, could, from your perspective at the bank, I guess because you would probably offer up all these services to your clients, do you think, as I said, it would be this kind of horrible withering away of businesses that don't take it? Or do you think it will just be gradually accepted by every SME out there, just naturally due to the constraints of the pandemic?
Yeah, I think it is probably the latter. I think you had already seen kind of a change in many SMEs in terms of the systems that they used and how they were operating. Even if you look 10, 15, 20 years ago, the advent of just how much more digital businesses became because of websites and things like that. We think about really that first kind of crossing into the digital sphere that they had, and now how that's changed. Both online purchasing and point of sale purchasing has started to change now. So you already have seen that gradual piece. I think you do have these events and these inflection points and these pivot points where this will only accelerate it. So we'll probably see an uptick over the next couple of years. You have some companies that have been able to operate with some of their older technology, but they've had to kind of hack it and make it work during the last year of what's been happening. But they're making decisions about their future investment, and it's going to look much different.
Brilliant. Well, guys, I think that's all we have time for. Thank you so much for your insights into open finance. It's one of those buzzwords that you really want to get nailed down at the very beginning so that you can actually work ahead. So thank you very much for your insight. I hope you've both had a good time yourselves.
Yeah, thank you, Doug.
Excellent. Well, and to all our viewers, thank you for watching as well. You can catch the rest of the series and much more over at www.fintechf.com and of course YouTube and LinkedIn. So I look forward to seeing you there, and have a good time. Goodbye.